This is the first ramble video of calendar year 2025. I just thought I'd share these. I saw them on Reddit and I thought it was pretty silly. It really reminds me of the wildfires in Australia and the most silly video that I've ever seen in my life of koalas sitting in the guy's car. This is very similar. No video. Where's the video? We just get these two still frames. They all look the same. There's definitely a factory that pumps out this model. What model is this sloth? Because I've seen this sloth a bajillion times before. This is certainly a certain model that somebody's pumping out. Yes, I believe sloths are animatronics. I think that all of the weird... It popped out of nowhere. This wasn't a thing in the 90s, a sloth encounter. What even is that word, too? You can pay extra money to have an encounter with a sloth or a koala, which I believe are just these animatronics that they just hook onto you. And the encounters are very strange and fast. They're fast about it. Unless you're some Illuminati bozo, then you get to have fun with it. But if you're just a pleb, paying your money for the sloth encounter, they move that thing along. It's a well-orchestrated event. And it's weird how they hang food with like little clips over the enclosure. And yeah, I really think that somebody's sitting there with the RC control and drives the little sloth animatronic around. I really do believe that. I know for a fact when I grew up that the koala at the wild animal park was a stuffed animal in the tree. Anyways, Antonio Luis Law was getting ready to go to a doctor's appointment when he entered his garage and came across an unlikely guest hanging off the steering wheel in his vehicle. It's believed to have come from a nearby wooded area. I'm not a rocket surgeon, but I think they're right. There was this guy in the comments. They'll always tell you how spooky. Oh, but watch out! That strange looking thing. Watch out, it's vicious. They absolutely can be. They're faster than you think and pull you towards their teeth. Here we go. You know what this reminds me of? It's the meme about the kids who has a dad that works for Nintendo. The kid on the playground who claims that their dad works for Nintendo. My dad had a sloth. Very nice little fellow, but incredibly foul-smelling. There were people responding to this guy. Oh, what? Wait, what? Your dad had a sloth? Tell me more, tell me more. And at the time, he hadn't responded anything, because this is just bullshit that somebody made up. You're surrounded by bullshitters. I'm still going to make that video about Freemasonry and certain types of people. You're surrounded by bullshitters. This is something that comes to mind all the time, how in middle school there were all these different jokes about, oh, your gullible's written on the ceiling, your face is in the dictionary next to the word gullible, etc. It's a big thing because people are so gullible. They believe anything that they're told, especially if it comes from the authority. Almost anybody will believe almost anything that is on the TV, and it is a sad part of life, and it just shows you that critical thinking and thinking for yourself is not a fostered part of our society. Unfortunately, it's all submit to the authority, and if you're not an expert, you're not allowed to have any opinion about anything, which of course is ludicrous, because I don't have 20 lifetimes to go get a PhD in 20 different fields to find out that the emperor has no clothes in 20 different situations. I've been through academia once, and I know that they're mostly a bunch of bozos who can hardly take care of themselves, let alone form coherent ideas and go against the establishment when the establishment so heavily pushes their own agenda, and you can't have your own opinions, not even if you're an expert. Anyways, I guess I did say it was a ramble video, but I did have a point for today's video. Something that I've been thinking about a lot. Met one of these things recently. I think this guy paid for an encounter. Let's see what he said. And was surprised with how strong they are. Strong as a machine. and how fast they can actually move. You know, it's called a sloth, but I guess they can move actually fast. It's since they've developed the robotic version as opposed to the plushy version that literally would never move. Like, it's called a sloth. They really shouldn't be moving all over the place. But now that we got these animatronic sloths, they can do whatever trick you want them to do and climb all over the enclosure, grabbing the little treats. They're not as sloth-like as they used to be, I guess. Tried to climb on everything. I was once, here's another that happened. So at the end of this story, everybody gets up and claps, okay? I was once surfing a point break in Central America and saved a sloth. Oh, they're telling this story every time they have a beer at a bar to try to pick up chicks. This story comes out, I guarantee to you. Saved a sloth from a cliffside. It was, you know, you're surfing right up at the cliffside to save a sloth. That's very, very brave. It was stuck on when the tide came in and trapped him. We extended a surfboard out and he climbed on, but boy, I did not expect the smell. They stink, and I learned they can move much faster than their reputation. It's the same thing with the koalas. Oh, what do you know? In the koalas, they make sure to put a bunch of nasty smelling stuff because that sells the story. If it smells, it must be real. It must be a real animal if it smells. This is just, I mean, noses. Everybody knows that scent is like one of the most primal things that can connect. A scent can take you back decades in an instant. So they know that. They are master manipulators. I hate the master word. Jesus told us not to call anyone master, and that's why you see it used everywhere. But anyways, they're manipulators, and they love abusing psychology, so they like to play those games. In their psyops, they're going to introduce strong smells if they can. In the encounter, in the experience, a strong smell, they know how much that can sell something. This just reminds me how it's always an emotional story. There are so many emotional chimpanzee stories out there because they know if they can tug on your heartstrings that they've already won. They already have you believing if they have you feeling sorry for something. That's also why in the beginning, I mean, now that we have more of the environmental movements and all that, but even today, they still don't really mind talking about, oh, chimpanzees stuck in a cage for their whole life. Oh, look at the gorilla in that tiny little enclosure. They kind of like that because it makes you feel sorry for something. And there you go. You've already bought it. If you feel sorry for it, then you already believe in it. Because if it was just a person in a suit, that's not. There's nothing to be sad about that. They're acting. I have so many questions. What country? Was it just a wild sloth? Or was it full? What was it named? Was it legal? Oh, this was the questions to that guy who claimed that his dad worked at Nintendo or whatever. Okay, so that was the ramble. This is something that I've just been thinking about a lot recently, and its connection to historical resets and just explaining the way things are. This person looks like they're smiling, like duping delight. There's some duper's delight in this person's face, in my opinion. And all the bozo actors in the background, who knows? That could just be an AI-generated background at this point. And there's kind of a disconnect between the person in the front. I would imagine this is a composite image of the central figure and who knows in the background. However, what is this? Is some story about there's a slave in Libya. Whether or not that happens, I mean, there's all sorts of things like sex trafficking. That's all over the world. They want you to think that slavery is this far off thing. My point of this, I believe this is a psyop made up story because I believe everything on the news is some made up story. And I think that they just want you to think that slavery is this far off thing that happens in Africa still sometimes. But we're all slaves. The system that they've created is slavery. We are wage slaves. And another thing is the sex trafficking and other types of that type of slavery is real and everywhere. There was a sex trafficking bust down the street from where I live. So there really is slavery, but it's just, sex work type and It's not the way that they want you to think. Some black person in Africa getting sold off to do manual labor somewhere. They want your mind to have bad notions about things, to not view the world the way that it really is, and to ignore. I think of David Lynch did this in his movies all the time. How what is life? It's like this. It's the crawling, crusty, nasty, dirty bug infested layer that's just an inch underneath this sunny green grass with the white picket fence. That's what life is. That everybody just sees the white picket fence and the green grass, but really what it is the sludge that's just an inch underneath, festering, and that's the way that the society is. All the darkness that's just an inch underneath the surface. And wage slavery, man, I worked at a university where I could walk into a classroom with so much technology on the walls that probably never, like, the room looks like a UFO, and there's enough technology on the wall to pay my salary for probably the rest of my lifetime in a single room, and nobody really uses it at all. And I get a raise of a fraction of a percent. I remember at my job, I worked at a university, and they gave me a fraction of a percent of a raise. It was like a slap in the face, where I walk into these rooms every day where I'm like, oh man, that TV right there is like my yearly salary. And I would even vocalize these things. I would complain about it, and students would complain against me that I was complaining about not getting paid enough. This is something I think about, though, how effed up the society is, that we're expected to go be a wage slave, and for what? To get nothing at the end of it? We should have a God-given right to have land to live on and to be left alone. And I think about how that's one of those things where in history they try to tell you, like, oh, religious persecution, people coming over from Europe to over here because of religious persecution. That's a bunch of bullshit. I think that they just wanted land. They wanted to be able to be in a place where they can own land. In Europe, it was already incredibly hard for people to own land and not be effed around with. That's what people want. Real people who are not just hollow shells that just do what they're programmed to. We want to be able to exist and be left alone. And they've built a society where you can't do that. You need to sacrifice your entire life. If you're not already born into it, you need to sacrifice your entire life just to get something to maybe pass it off. And how much does the government take away? And, to go back to the times, people were rioting and going against the government for tiny little taxation. And look at the point that we're at now. That's ridiculous. Anyways, what I have to say about this is I've been thinking about how all of this fits in with historical resets, and how you can tell that right after a historical reset, it's a mad dash to grab up as much land as you possibly can. And you have like 3 different factions going on. It's kind of interesting how often things come up in threes. And so in my mind, you got these 3 different factions. You have a historical reset, and you have 3 different factions. You have the government people, the people who know all the Latin, they know how the government stuff works, the education sector, you might think. They're trying to get the governments rebooted. They're getting the printing presses going again with all the filigree stamps and whatever that's already made, because they're just inheriting this stuff again. They are coming up with the huge legal documents and all that stuff. You have that branch. Then you have the thugs. Why in all these old pictures are there these thuggish looking individuals standing outside and climbing on the roof? And that's the arm. So you got the brain is the government aspect. You got the arm, the strong arm is the thug aspect. And sometimes today that's the leading power. I'd say in places like New York and Sicily, the mob, the strong arm is still the one that's calling all the shots. The government, of course, is pretending to run the show these days. We're in a big brain era. Everybody thinks that they're so smart today. So the government has to pretend to have total control of everything these days, but the mobsters are a real big contender, one of the big three. And then the third one are you have these Illuminati, the Vanderbilts, the big families, the rich people. And I think that this all really comes into perspective when you look at the historical resets. You have people are going up in balloons and taking pictures of all the infrastructure, making these great maps of the cities and auctioning it off to the Vanderbilt type tycoon families that survived the resets in their bunkers. You have the bewildered masses, which that's the cattle. We'll get to that. That's the fourth thing, but it's not really a part of the trifecta of the ownership. The Vanderbilt rich families, the stronger mafia, thug-looking people who aren't afraid of getting their hands dirty and killing people when it comes to that. Because the government types and the rich types, they don't like to get their hands dirty. So they kind of need each other a little bit. And another thing that comes into this is the historical money of America. When you look into like the $5,000 bill, that's all early America history, which is very strange and unusual. That early America, big money's being thrown around. You have these big families that are calling all the shots. And the masses are on the beach looking bewildered or vacant from the cities. So that's, I guess, the fourth. It's below the pyramid, though. The pyramid at the top, and then you got the masses. That explains all the old photos. Why they're documenting everything, selling everything off to the richos. Why the government's trying to kickstart itself in all these different places. I guess you could throw in, like, the Vatican types. Church of England, Vatican. There's probably a organized religion aspect to this, too. I don't know. Is that, like, in competition with the government? Maybe that's the crown above the brain. Just throwing out ideas. So yeah, that's what's been in my mind. Historical resets. You have the confused masses who are handed a hat and given their role in society. Here's your hat. This is what your role in this new society is. Do you have a problem with it? You can go off to the insane asylum. You got all the orphans and the children incubators. And then you have the Vanderbilts. You have the thugs, all the thug-looking individuals standing guard outside of places. And yeah, trying to kickstart the governments again. Leave room for nature, leave room for nature. What I wanted to talk about this is just a personal story. Somebody married into my family who is upper crust. And apparently they own like a bajillion acres out in some no man land. And it's just one piece of the puzzle. It's the high society. All of these places land grab so that the cattle get nothing, so that the plebs have nothing. If it's not owned by a government institution or a school or a religion or also today we have corporations. That's kind of another aspect. Some mob family. They own basically everything, and we get scraps. And you got to waste your entire life being a wage slave to get barely anything, and then you're too old to work the land and enjoy it anyways. And so yeah, to go back to the story of the really rich person that married into my family, they own an incredible amount of land that no one person, no one family should ever own such an incredible amount of land. And apparently part of the agreement of them even owning that land is that it never gets developed. So there's just this huge conspiracy out there for all of the land to be owned by as few people as possible. And you're not allowed to even develop the land. You're not allowed to distribute this land. Like 20,000 acres. 20,000 people could have their own acre, which is that's like a dream. Why is that a dream? For people, I get to live my wage slave life so that maybe one day I can own. You don't even own because you're going to be paying taxes on that forever. Like an acre, couple acres. Why is that a dream? That should just be inherent to being born. You should be able to have land to live on and not be effed around with. But nope, we don't have nice things. You're a slave, whether you like it or not, most of us. Also, they're giving our land away. That's we don't even have our lands anymore. Mass deportations since 9/11, major mind games. oh, the terrorists, the Middle Easterns are all terrorists. And then ever since 9/11, they've been flooding Middle Eastern people everywhere, all over the world. Huge gaslighting mind games, demoralization against people. So yeah, leave room for nature, because it's not for us. They just don't want us to be able to have land and be left alone. We're supposed to sacrifice our entire life for the machine, get crushed under the cogs into dust. How much of the U.S. land is inhabited? The vast majority is undeveloped. Overpopulation is such a lie. It's such a hoax. Overpopulation. They can't even keep downtowns bustling anymore. It's all empty, and I mean, it really seems like they're getting ready for another reset, and they would even do a lower population in the next time. It seems like they only destroy more and more. And I don't know how you'd believe in overpopulation traffic. I guess they get people to believe in overpopulation through mass transit and making it an unenjoyable experience. I think I've mostly said everything. There's this interesting article. Was this an NPR article, I think? The U.S. is enormous. It's hundreds of millions of acres big, and it's full of resources, not to mention some of the most productive land on Earth. And this got us thinking, the U.S. has all of this land. It's been such an amazing resource for the country and the economy. How exactly are we using it? In Cardiff, I will present you with the object that I think best represents how we use the land in the U.S. Whatever. It's about 1.919 is an interesting number to come up. 1.9 billion acres of land that we're dealing with. What's the biggest use of the land in the U.S.? Cattle. I think that's funny. That's one of those things you can take in many different ways. Goyim, cattle. Is the cattle us? Is the cattle actual cattle? It could even be a biblical reference to the land of milk and honey. Maybe these got out of order. What's the second biggest use of land? Forest land. So a lot of forest land. National parks are a huge part of this. That they try to spin it as being environmental. And really, it's just more landlocking. It's just more false scarcity and making it unobtainable to just have a normal life. They make a system where you're forced dependent on it because we don't have things like a right to just live life. And overpopulation, again, a huge hoax. The monetary system is a huge aspect of this, that they make it's a monopoly system. So if you start on the bottom, you just can't make it. You're not going to be able to. And I mean, the boomers kind of lucked out, but we don't even need to get into that. If you're not a boomer, if you were born after that and your parents aren't financially helping you out, you're just screwed. Yeah, you really are, unless you're like Baffo and you get a cushy job. Most of the top landowners are cattle ranchers and oil barons. It's mostly owned by a few. Almost everything is owned by very few people. All wrapped up in this happy meal. Are you happy yet? Well, yep, that's it. Hope you enjoyed this ramble. Let me know what you think. The big part of this was just thinking of historical resets and how it's always been a land grab. That it's all about acquiring as much land as physically possible and shutting it off from being owned by the public. And that it forces everybody in the rat race just to get a place to live and be left alone. That's it for this video. God bless everyone.